Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
I see a lot of hope that you see there's massive pent up demand. If you even see the GDP growth rate, what is projected by IMF, let me tell you what IMF has said. This year, the world will degrow, the global economy will degrow by 4.9%. India will degrow by 4.5%. 2021, the IMF predicts the global growth will be 5.4%, but India will be 6%. Now, if India is 6% plus, and in 2020 it was minus 4.5%, look at the swing. Look at what we are, there's a massive pent-up demand in retail, in consumers. You see, Maruti has sold over 1 lakh cars in the month of July. Tractor sales are back to 90%. So there are certain sectors which are severely damaged and they'll take time to recover. And, these are hospitality, travel, tourism. This is going to take time to recover. But I see, let me tell you one large infrastructure multinational company, very well-known company. It has 21 factories in India. April, May, all were shut. Now all are open in July. All are open with 10 to 70% productivity or manpower coming back gradually. And we expect that August, September will come back to normal times. The same company has 300 sites where they do installation and servicing, 300 sites in India. And 70% are fully operational. So you take any number, you take any criteria, I think India is slowly limping back to pre-COVID days. But don't forget, even pre-COVID days, there was a slowdown. The Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme of the Government of India has been a tremendous benefit for the poor people, for the rural economy. Also, the Prime Minister's announcement that we will give free ration of 2 kilos of rice or wheat and pulses, wheat and pulses till November 2020. So, the government is doing it bits in the rural areas. They're deshackling the agriculture industry. They're allowing farmers to sell directly in the market. They're cutting middlemen. So farmers will get a better realizable value. Everything possible. Monsoon gods have been good. The estimate is that we'll have 103% normal monsoon. Take instance the food grains. The biggest positive factor I see is that our warehouses are full of food grain stockpiles. We have over 100 million stockpiles of food grains. What have central banks done globally? Central banks have done 3 things to ease the pain. Monetary policy have done 3 things. Lower interest rates. Our interest rates today are the lowest in 10 years. On Thursday, we have a Reserve Bank Monetary Policy Committee. There's a 50-50 view. 50% view is that they'll bring it down further 25 basis points. 50% economists feel that they will keep status quo because they are worried about inflation. So if you see, one is reducing interest rate. Second one, asset purchases. And third is injecting liquidity. Look at the amount of liquidity Reserve Bank has put in the market. They've given money to banks to give to SIDBI, NABARD, housing finance company. They've given money to the banks to buy bonds from the mutual funds because there was a crisis in the debt market. They've given money to banks to lend to BBB and AA and single A companies. So we are flushed with liquidity. RBI has flushed the market with liquidity. So, but aversion of banks must be there. And the problem here is that the NPAs are already high. Government has done remarkably by saying we'll give you 3 lakh crores to MSME and guarantee, give 20% additional working capital. And out of the 3 lakh crore, I think 1 lakh crore is committed, 81,000 is dispersed. So it's moving. But if you talk to the bankers, they say on an existing MSME portfolio, the NPAs are 12.5%. If the existing NPAs of MSME are 12.5%, pushing more money to the same people or the same lot, because MSMEs are squeezed from the big boys. The public sector, the private sector, they don't pay them on time. MSMEs ask is, instead of giving us more money, let our people whom we provided services and goods pay us back. But that payment culture in India is non-existent, Shekhar. You buy a thing on credit, you pay when you like to pay. We have to improve the discipline there. The only difference between our central bank and the other global central banks is that we have lowered interest rates and we are lowering interest rates. We have infused enormous liquidity in the system. Asset purchases by global central banks. Our central bank is not doing that. And our central bank is giving money to banks to do that asset purchases. Like the US Federal Reserve has bought municipal bonds, junk bonds, commercial paper, the same thing ECB has done. The same thing Bank of Japan has done. But our Reserve Bank, I think the law doesn't permit Reserve Bank to buy private sector paper. So the RBI is using the medium of the banks. Now the banks have to be more aggressive. But the bank's issue is that we already have a weak balance sheet. We have to raise equity. Our NPAs are already high. Gross NPAs are high. We have to collect more money. Various sectors like hospitality and all are in trouble. Airports, hospitality. How are we going to get our funds back? So, so the request with the industry is ask the central bank, and we keep hearing that government and Reserve Bank are talking about. In 2008, 2009, they allowed restructuring of loans. Give 1 year restructuring for this pandemic. So it means moratorium. We also want to help individual small buyers of property and all, give them time to pay, give them time to recover their income, give them time to find a job, give them time to maybe divest their savings or whatever. So if you give a restructuring window of 1 year, that means you're not collecting money from anyone who doesn't want to pay. If they want to pay, they're most welcome. But if they don't want to pay, you give them, but it doesn't become an NPA. By giving moratorium, we are creating a problem later on. I think we have to even be concerned about inflation. We have to be concerned, steady. We don't believe in big bangs. We do everything modestly. So, you will never see 100 basis point cut or increase in interest rates. It's always drop by drop.
It happened in 2008, one Monday morning when it looked like the world will come to an end. I think in October, late October or early November, that those kinds of cuts were carried out. You think there is time to do something drastic like that?
I don't think so. I think financial stability is very important. And there is limited financial space with the government also. So we have to be careful. See, you must have seen the tax revenue collections for the first quarter. They've come down by 33%.
Right.
April, May, June by 33%. But very cleverly, the government has increased the excise duties on petrol, diesel and ATF, airline turbine fuel. Right. And so they have collected fair amount of money without upsetting too much the price, because the price of oil has come down significantly, crude. That is our biggest advantage. People are saying about downgrade. I said there's no justification for any international rating agencies, because our long-term strategy, our long-term growth prospects are so, and the biggest problem we have is foreign exchange. We have over $500 billion in foreign exchange. We've never had it so good. $523 billion. It is 13, 14 months imports. We had 15 days imports. Now we have 14 months imports. Reserves, we are the fifth largest reserves in the world now. Switzerland, Russia, Japan and China are ahead of us. But reserves are good for a rainy day. It helps us on a rainy day. And if we have to import more, suppose the oil goes back to $100, $130 per barrel, then we will need all of those reserves. So you can't squander it away. There are various suggestions that reserves can be used for domestic growth and all that, to spend on infrastructure. Because one move the government will have to do, and everyone recognizes it, that there is massive unmet demand in infrastructure. We have to spend much more on infrastructure, because then jobs will be created, steel and cement will be used, which are surplus capacities. You want to exhaust the existing capacities that these factories have, these companies have. So spending on infrastructure is very essential now. You know, various countries like Singapore and Abu Dhabi and all have used their reserves by forming investment companies, and they invest globally or they invest in India. So what I meant by asset purchase is what central banks are doing. Central banks are even in the past doing equity asset purchases. There's no harm of government by buying some good equities also.
Right.
So, you know, we have to think through how to use this foreign exchange reserves, but we can't squander it away, and we can't utilize it in a flippant manner, because we've had, you know, we've started with 100, 200 billion. We've now come to 500 billion. It's a great achievement. It's really because it's through FDI and FPIs, foreign portfolio. Now, don't forget, foreign portfolio investors are very, very uncertain, slippery. Little negative news, they'll take money out. As we saw in March, April, the foreign portfolio invested took out massive sums of money from India. Massive. June, July, May, June, they sort of net inflows were positive. July, again, the inflows are negative. So if they decide to abandon India, go out of India, and feel that the prospects are not good for 1 year, you can lose large sums of these reserves overnight. These are not FDI. So these are not put in plant and machinery. They are in equity. There is some talk in the market that, again, from your part of the world, that India desperately needs a DFI, a development financial institution, because no one is funding projects, or very few banks are funding projects, long-term projects. And you need a DFI kind of thing, an infrastructure company or something who would lend money, because more and more infrastructure is being privatized, be it airport or be it roads or ports or, you know, power and renewables. So they all need long-term 15-year money, because it takes 5 years for a power project to go on stream. No, so your issue was on risk
Aversion.
confident to lend. But it's such a vicious circle. We already have an NPA. The financial system is already weak with large NPAs and potentially increasing NPAs after this pandemic. And in that scenario, whatever liquidity the RBI is giving to the banks are putting it again with the Reserve Bank in reverse repo.
Right.
So Reserve Bank is bringing down the reverse repo rates every time they have a policy. Now it's 3.75%. I won't be surprised if on Thursday they bring it down by another 100 basis points. So to make it a disincentive for banks to put money with Reserve Bank, then you have to lend.
So if banks have to lend today, where should they be lending? Individuals, retail, or projects?
No, combination of all. Combination of all. It has to be projects also. But you know, banks are saying we don't have long-term funds. These are current accounts and savings account and term deposits. We don't have 20-year money. We don't have 15-year money. So how do we lend 15 years for a project? So that is which is what IDBI and ICICI and all used to do when they were development financial institutions. They used to give 15-year loans.
Does it show that India needs to rethink its regulatory mechanism?
I think we have to rethink our legal mechanism. It takes far too long for the culprits to be booked. And we have to, you know, one of the pending things I think with the government is, and they have been talking about it, that we need reforms in land, labor and law. And so once
we lost you for a second, it seems.
Solvency cases. So we need to build infrastructure in NCLT.
Can you repeat that? Because we had an outage for a second, it seems. So you said 3 reforms: land, labor,
law. Land, labor and law.
Yes.
And labor and law. We need these reforms in order to attract even foreign companies to come into India with manufacturing. You must have a little flexi labor policy, and land must be easily available to set up factories. And you see, law, efficacy and the efficiency of the legal system is non-existent almost. Because by the time Harshad Mehta was tried, he died. He had died already. That type of thing, the scandal of Harshad Mehta or Ketan Parekh, all these people. So it takes far too long for our legal systems to work. Even the insolvency is IBC was a great initiative of the government. But the time it takes because of lack of infrastructure, lack of qualified people, lack of resolution professionals willing to take up that job. So it is very complex.
Do you think Yes Bank issue is now stable and sorted out? Or do you still see it as a systemic threat?
No, I think it's much under control. The new management, the new CEO has, in the last 2-3 quarters, they have created a large amount of reserves for non-performing loans. And so, a lot of that is being taken care of. And we saw a glimmer of hope. The deposits also increased in this quarter a little bit. The crux is whether deposit increases. And now with State Bank CFO running it and State Bank behind it, I think that confidence has come back again in the market. It'll take some time.
HDFC also put in some money.
Yeah, we all put in. You see, the reason people are asking me, why did we put in money? We feel that as part of a large player of the financial sector, if a large bank like Yes Bank goes under, it will impact the financial stability and everyone will get impacted. So it is better to have a corporate view and cooperate with other banks like Axis and ICICI, and we all helped the private sector banks. So we all, public, private, we all got together and we gave the first round of capital, and then they raised the second round in the market. And hopefully they've raised enough now to last them for a couple of years and to start lending and cleaning up their books.
So are you optimistic about the bank, or have you mentally written off this money that...
No, you can't write 1,000 crore. I'm optimistic. If we are not optimistic, we wouldn't just dish out. It's not my money. It's the shareholders' money.
Can the Indian model of a public sector dominated banking system serve the needs of a rapidly growing and globalizing economy?
Well, we are used to public sector banking. Today, public sector banking is predominantly lending. Private sector may have a smaller sliver of operations. Unlike mutual funds, where unit trust and LIC mutual fund and have been left behind, and the mutual fund industry has gone up. Similarly, in insurance, in a short period of time, almost 50% of insurance is done by private sector. It's not so in the banking sector.
Why?
It is not so because there are very few banks. There are 2-3 banks. And the ones that have started lately, the ones they got into trouble, people have lost confidence when this large number of bad debts are shown or banks make losses. Confidence of people is lost. They always go for quality. So when something like Yes Bank happens, the beneficiary is State Bank. We are the second beneficiary because in these difficult days, our deposits have gone up significantly because people want to be safe. You hear of other banks. I don't want to name individual banks, but you hear of other banks that they are weak banks or they are in difficulty because large NPAs will come out. So basically, the faith of the common man is with the public sector. This is Government of India. Even if it is a bank which is rated C or D, they will never default. So that confidence a common man has in a public sector bank. So I think doing away 100% with a public sector bank model, I don't think is possible in India because we are used to this safety angle. I feel that the exchange rate, which is a free exchange rate, because of India's stability, because of India's long-term growth prospects, because of the large reserves, because of the conservative nature of our central bank, I think our depreciation in our currency has been minimal. If you look at Brazil, and it's 32%, the currency has depreciated 32%. If you look at Russia, it's depreciated 14%. Turkey has depreciated 20% since January this year, in 7 months, while we have 5%, around 5%. So I think I don't think that you should do a massive devaluation or let the rupee come down significantly. And I
So
think
a little bit, 80, 85 like that.
no need. Why? I don't see the need. It's a free market. See, today we are getting money in. Our FDIs have, take the strengths. Our outflows have come down. Outflows on oil has come down. At $40 a barrel, we saved $46 billion in 1 year. Don't forget, in April, it was $20. In May, it became $30. Now it's around $40, $45. The amount of saving in foreign exchange we have, it's a huge benefit. Our second largest imports are electronics. Now with 5 months, 4 months gone in this pandemic, people are not importing large amount of electronics to, so even the import of that has come down. On the other hand, inflows have increased. We are the largest recipients of NRI deposits coming back. In 1990, we got $80 billion from NRIs repatriating. This year, it may be a little less. My worry is something else. My worry is that GCC countries are having their own pain. And large number of our population is in those countries. And they remit a lot of money because their families are here. Now, many countries are thinking of having quotas. Kuwait has already started. There's a draft quota bill where they say no country can have more than 15% population of the country. So if Kuwait's population, I think, is about 4.5 million people. So not more than 15% Indians can work there. Today, the number is much higher. And people will lose jobs in the other parts of the Gulf countries. Oil prices have come down, oil revenues have come down, and so they'll have to come back. And we have to find something for them. They'll come back with their money. So our reserves are going to, that inflow is also going to increase, because if they lose their job, they're not going to keep the money in any of these countries. So, we have our foreign exchange position is reasonably strong, so there's no need to depreciate the currency.
On NBFCs, will you talk a little bit more about the kind of problems they've run into and why and what's the way out?
See, the biggest problem they ran into when money was easily available and a plenty. Even today, the money is plenty, but not easily available. That's the difference. Many of them borrowed 3 months, 6 months commercial paper, because that was the most economical cost to them. And they lent money at higher rates. Now, with a total asset liability mismatch, Reserve Bank also got a bit strict on ALM. Mutual funds, who were the largest companies giving money as commercial paper for 3 months and 6 months to NBFCs, realized that it's more dangerous to give money to smaller NBFCs. So they sort of withdrew. Their debt funds had redemptions. The fresh money mutual funds are getting are lower. So that amount came down. Investable amounts came down. So as a result of that, NBFC suffered. They had to sort of realign their borrowing program from short term to medium term. And lack of availability of medium term resources, then strain on lenders, strain on their borrowers, NPAs, delay in payment. So there's a combination of things, a little poor management, everything. But ALM mismatch was the single most reason why they got into trouble. It is appalling. It is really appalling to see how people live in slums, particularly when there's heavy rains and monsoon time. And I think we failed in our duty by not addressing this. And I have been in HDFC for 42 years. I remember a committee was set up 40 years ago on how to remove slums in Bombay, and we are still talking about it. So it's really appalling. It's sad what we see. There's a slum redevelopment authority, and but we have to spend much more. See, urban infrastructure per capita, if you see, India only spends $16 per capita on urban infrastructure. $16 per capita. Global benchmark is $100 per capita in urban infrastructure. and China is $116 per capita. We have to spend more in urban infrastructure. And the government, if they can't manage, they have to privatize it. Like, for instance, they privatize the travel. They can privatize the BEST bus services in Maharashtra or in Mumbai. Or, they can privatize the railways and get some money. Anyway, hospitals and all are being privatized. And we see acute shortage of hospitals when something like coronavirus hits us. Private or public, we don't have beds, adequate beds. Because spend on urban infrastructure is so low and we've neglected it. And slums are particularly, we have to redevelop the slums. We have to now, the new government program, I don't know if you saw that, rental housing, which the Minister of Housing just announced recently, retrofitting old government homes and using government land to build rental housing. I think it's an excellent scheme if it is worked, because the private sector will build on government land. It's public-private partnership.
If we have this conversation again in first week of August next year, what kind of India and what kind of overall environment do you imagine? Give me your best case scenario and your worst case scenario.
I have only one case scenario, which I think we will be booming in August next year. We will be booming because I mentioned about the pent-up demand, and the growth rate which is projected by the IMF and others is we'll have a 6% positive growth rate. And we are getting to become a $3 trillion economy already. And our vision to become a $5 trillion economy in 2025. We have to aim for that. And
that's not going to happen in 2025, but
it won't happen. It'll take 3-4 years more, because for it to happen, you need 7% GDP growth rate every year. We are not going to have 7% GDP growth rate.